Yes. Well, to start with, my name's Natalie Doran-Browne, and I'm in the Faculty of Veterinary and Agricultural Sciences at the University of Melbourne. So my research is in the climate change space, and I work with farming systems. So most of my work has been around reducing greenhouse gas emissions from either farms or across the agricultural sector. I've also done work with helping farmers to adapt to climate change and looking at specific mitigation options that can be used on the farms. And now I'm working on a project with ACR, the Australian Centre of International Agricultural Research, and that is looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the agricultural sector in Fiji, Vietnam, and we're collaborating with New Zealand to also work with Kenya and Indonesia. And so yes, I've worked in this area for some time and really enjoy it because over 10 years or more, there's been so many changes at the policy level, at the community level, and at the international level. And it's, when I said that we've come to a bit of a pinnacle, it's almost like things are starting to align a bit better now, particularly at the community level, and yeah, really the organizational level too. I think the policy level's catching up a little bit, but yeah, hopefully they'll get there. Yeah, so I work with livestock systems. I've done a fair amount of work on carbon accounting and carbon neutral farming. And so it's a matter of looking at the mitigation options which are relevant within the country. So that really means within the environment of the country that you're looking at. So obviously, when you've got an island in the Pacific, you have a very tropical system, and it's similar to some of the areas in Queensland, but yeah, not so much in the southern parts of Australia. So any options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions need to be considered for the environment that they're going to go into. So we look at examining those options that are suitable for the countries. But then we're also working with the government experts in especially Fiji and Vietnam. And so we're working with the governance structures. So in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at a broad scale, so across the sector, you need to have the right structure in place. So that's within the government, like having groups already set up that talk within different ministries, and that can filter down to the farm level, whether that's through extension officers or through other types of consultants. But there's a whole structure that needs to exist for this to go in as a policy and to work down from that. So we look at specific mitigation options, but we're also looking at how to implement them more broadly. And we're looking at ways that we can assist in improving the national greenhouse gas inventory. Well, one of the most interesting things has been the similarities. So I'll just provide some background information. With Fiji and Vietnam, they're at very different stages of developing their national inventories. So Vietnam has been working on that for a longer period of time, so it's more developed. Yet some of the issues that you see with Fiji and Vietnam are similar. So, and that comes back to that structure that I was talking about, that, you know, there needs to be local experts who can calculate the emissions from agriculture that's going into that inventory. And so there needs to be some local research happening as well, so that you know that emissions that are produced in the environment within the country are more accurate based on the environmental conditions there. So that research is required, like more work is needed there. And Fiji and Vietnam were originally chosen because they're quite contrasting in their systems. So you have these very different environments, and yet there are some common steps that need to be taken in order to help improve and to build up the capacity in those countries to address some of these issues around mitigating emissions and addressing climate change. So we're doing a bit of an assessment at the moment to see where we can add the most value to this process. So we're just reviewing what's been done so far with the national inventory, and this is where the other projects that I mentioned that are run through different countries come into it, because we have the opportunity to talk to some of the people that are running those projects and make sure that moving forward that we're not doubling up on things that have already been done. So it's a bit of fact finding at the moment. It's also working closely with our in-country partners to see what their priorities are, and making sure that what each country sees as the highest priority, that we're working very closely so that that can be included, because it's really in the early stages of various types of training and development for the inventory. And there's people in all the countries that we're working with that have expertise in this area, but they often have quite broad roles to fill as well, because there may be more of a limited number of people that have the expertise currently. And so there's a smaller number of people that are having to provide a lot of input at the national scale. And so being able to go in and provide training for either those people or for additional people to help with the workload is one way that we can assist. Yeah, well, it's a really fast-growing space, and internationally there is a fair amount of funding going into this, which is absolutely required given the climate challenges that we're facing at a global level. So one thing to be aware of, the countries that have the most to lose as a result of climate change are often not the ones, are generally not the ones that are causing the problem. So in other words, take Fiji, for example. It's a low-lying coastal environment. So sea level rise is a huge issue for them. But Fiji's greenhouse gas emissions are tiny on the global scale. And yet, in order to be able to negotiate with countries that are producing huge amounts of emissions, they have a number of really good initiatives in place and policies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So on the global scale, they can, it will help them to negotiate with some of these other other countries. So what you tend to find in a development setting is, often these smaller countries need to take some big steps, even when they're not the cause of the problem. Yes, well, Australia's a bit behind at the moment on the policy side, unfortunately. So we do need to catch up. It is very encouraging, though, to see what other countries are doing, and just to see the acceptance as well amongst communities in different countries. It's, you know, it's not really debated in some areas whether climate change needs to be addressed or things need to be done. It's just accepted that, you know, we know this is happening and there are steps that need to be taken. So in the Australian context, at the government level, we really need to catch up and have some better policies in place for action around climate change. And part of it now, though, it's becoming a little bit less relevant, the policy, because what we're seeing is this upswell in community action, and people are quite conscientious, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to be environmentally sustainable. And we're also finding at the corporate level that many very large organizations, they know that they need to either reduce their impact on the environment and reduce their emissions burden. And what these organizations have done, some of them have compared the emission targets, so Australia's emission targets, with what's currently being done, and realize that it's not enough. And so a lot of these companies don't want to be in the position where they need to drastically change their practices at the last minute, because that would be very costly for them to do. So you'll find many of the big organizations are already making that change. They're already reducing their emissions impact. And so you have these two levels. You've got the corporate and the community. And so it's actually becoming less relevant what the government's doing or not doing, because things are changing anyway. And when it comes to agriculture, you have these supply chains, and if we're exporting, and if either the countries or the companies purchasing the products say, well, look, we're not going to buy product anymore unless it's carbon neutral or unless these certain things have been considered, then you start to see changes on the ground as well. And so, and this is happening already. So we're seeing a lot of really positive change throughout agriculture. It's great, and it really shows how individual action does have an impact, because the large organizations are only changing, well, for a number of reasons, but, you know, having to be more responsible in terms of the environment, you know, it wouldn't have happened if individuals hadn't decided that that is an important thing.